Hi everyone and welcome back to designing a website in Figma. In today's video, we are going to be continuing to work on illustrations for our features page. This is the final result. Let's get started. So in the previous episode, we have created this illustration, meaning we created something in line with the micro branding for our second feature, meaning we used this purple color. We used also a mock-up of a phone that we created actually from scratch. And in today's video, we are going to be using the iPhone mock-up that we have created, and we are going to create some illustration for our first feature. So we are going to be trying to create something that's in line with these colors for this feature, which in this case is black and white. Very simple, right? So what I'm thinking here is to again use the phone, because after all we are talking about an app, right? So let me just copy this source frame for the first illustration. I'm going to copy that over here, and then I am going to type in first feature visual. I am going to remove everything from this frame except for the phone mockup, right? So this means removing this line, and also this means removing the contents of our phone screen. So I'm going to select all of this and then hit backspace, and yeah, we basically just get an empty phone template. Now I think we could try and making a completely dark background. So let's just experiment with going completely black, so 0, and this is what we get, right? I think the image of the phone actually works well against a dark background. I think since we have created this silver lining, I think it differentiates it sufficiently against the background. I'm just going to do one thing, and that's duplicating this phone onto like outside of the frame, just so that we have a backup of this object in case we make some modifications to the phone that we don't like. And the first modification would be to change the size so that it is slightly smaller. Right? I'm using the scale tool, which you can access by pressing the key on your keyboard, the letter K, right? So as you can see, we are using approximately 80% size right now. I think that could work, 80% size. And also I'm going to increase the height of this rectangle. That's basically our green background, which is white for now, right? This is the background. We could turn it to gray, red, whatever, right? That's our background. Okay, so what I think I'm gonna do here is create some kind of a graph, a chart. Very simple. So let me use my pen tool by pressing P on my keyboard, and then I'm going to click once, twice, and create something like this, a shape like this approximately, right? So that's our chart. Of course, it's going to be way wider. The stroke is going to be like 20 points, maybe a little bit less. I don't know yet. We could also change the end point to round, right? Now we are getting somewhere. And also I'm going to round these corners so that we smooth out this curve, right? So 20, 24, something like that. Quite just a few simple modifications, and you can see that it completely changes the character of the line. The feeling is way better, and I just think we can move on with further adjustments. So I think I'm going to shorten this a little. So what I just did is basically select this, press enter, select one of these points, and then use my arrows to move this around the screen. And this is going to be, I think we could go for white. Yeah, I like that. So it's going to be white, kind of match the theme that we have, black and white right here. I'm also going to select the icon, the features icon, or I could go to assets actually and search for features icon right here. Drop it here. Perfect. And I'm going to use that inside of our frame. It's not visible against the background, so why don't I change the background color to dark gray instead of totally black. And then I could also add an effect inner shadow that would be white, would be blurry, would have a negative spread, and would be positioned like this with even bigger blur, and then reduced opacity to make it more visually interesting, right? We added a little bit of a gradient basically. So with this chart, let me also use my ellipse tool by pressing O and then clicking once. I'm gonna make this smaller, about this size, sample the white color, and then I'm just gonna duplicate this, right? Make it larger, reduce the opacity to around 30 or 40, something like that, move that behind our first ellipse, and then I'm going to apply an effect, and specifically a drop shadow. So let me select this ellipse, the first one, effects, drop shadow, and do bigger blurring, bigger Y coordinates, and play around with the opacity of this effect to get the result that we like. Yep, so I think something like this could work. I think we could also make the line a little bit less prominent, so 14, maybe this could be a bit bigger, 34. Let's try that. And then I think we could also play around with the overall shape of this curve, basically. I think we could even add a point, right? Let me add a point, or maybe two of those. And we need to distribute these points evenly, right? I'm going to select all of these points by shift clicking individual points. You can see that they turn blue, so that means they are selected. And then I can go to distribute horizontal spacing, and I can actually use that on individual points, not only individual objects. So let me press that, and you can see it distributed our points. Now I just need to select each of these individually and play around with the vertical position of these points. So I don't have to think about how distant they are horizontally, but I can just play around with the vertical position and maybe get a result that I like. This looks a bit weird, so let me actually make this wider, just affecting the width of this, and I think we could maybe reduce the rounding to 16. I'm just gonna experiment with the positions, right? So yeah, I think this is all right. Let me also change the rounding again. I mean, yeah, I think we could work with this. The goal here is to make this line look natural, right? So this seems as somewhat natural growth of a certain metric, I guess. So a couple of things. To make this look like semi-3D, I'm going to add a couple of effects. The first effect, let me move that above the screen. The first effect is going to be drop shadow. So selecting this line, go to effects, click plus, and then under drop shadow, by clicking this icon here, I'm going to again adjust these parameters to get a result that looks right to me. So I think something along those lines could make it look as if it's floating in the air, right? So just by using drop shadow, we have achieved this effect. So yeah, I think this works, right? Then the second effect I'm going to add is inner shadow. So similarly to something that we already did here with this icon, we're going to do with this line. So I'm going to add a new effect, right? So again, add a new effect, inner shadow, and then I'm going to make sure that we get a black shadow coming from the bottom, right? That one is going to come from the bottom, right? As you can see. So coming from the bottom, we could make this, I think, like 5. We could make it, these blur points could be at 5. Opacity maybe a little bit bigger, like 43. And notice how just by using simple effects, we achieve 3D effects. I think that's really great, really powerful, and also really simple. So why don't we use that, right? And also let me now add another inner shadow, and this one is going to be coming from the top, and it's going to be white. However, since it's white, we can't see a white shadow on a white background. So in this case, the background is the stroke, which we are going to change to maybe gray, light gray, like this. Very subtle change. However, we are going to make sure the white shadow is really strong so that we get kind of, you can notice the color going from white to gray. So it needs to be subtle yet strong enough, right? So that's kind of sometimes the challenge that you have to just experiment with. Yeah, so when it comes to the Y coordinates, why don't we do like 4, blurriness of 8, and yeah. So as you can see, this line now looks as if it's 3D, but it isn't, right? It's just a simple line with couple of effects. You can manipulate with this line and it looks as if, kind of looks like a plastic tube, doesn't it? Right? I think it looks like a plastic tube. So why don't we also apply the same effect to this circle right here, same color approximately, and then select this line, select these 2 inner shadows and paste that here, right? And we get this. I think we're gonna have to play around with the shadow positions and maybe increase the blurring so that this looks more as a sphere. So it needs to be a bit more subtle, but I think this works well. So we have a 3D chart without using any 3D software. So we have like semi-3D style. I think it's even called like claymorphism, but I'm not sure if that's really what we are kind of looking at here, right? So it's just this, what you can see. I think I'm going to turn off the white gradient here, and I'm going to the white shadow, sorry. I'm going to use a white background color for this and maybe adjust strength of this one inner shadow we have left. Okay, so this looks semi-3D. That's awesome. We could also make this bigger. Yep, I like that. And yeah, let me just group this. So I'm going to press Shift and click this circle, this one, and this line. Command G to group this, and we get a chart line. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to align this to the top left and then just press Shift and arrows a couple times to position this phone over here. And I'm going to create a background for our chart. So I'm going to create a rectangle by pressing R on my keyboard. I think I'm going to go for this color, right? So this mid, slightly darker gray. And then I'm going to round these corners, and I'm going to use a shadow as well. And why don't I use the shadow from the line, right? So select this line directly, drop shadow, Command C, Command V right here, and maybe increase the blur and reduce the opacity. Yep, I think that's nice. I'm gonna make this even darker, this gray color, and then I'm just gonna select this and press Command Option right bracket to move that on the top of our background, right? So like this. I'm gonna move this icon outside of the frame for a little bit, and I'm going to do one thing actually. One thing I'm gonna do. I'm gonna use a frame tool, so F on my keyboard or click this icon, and then I'm gonna create a frame. This frame is actually, I'm gonna replace this rectangle with this frame. You're gonna see why later. So I'm gonna select this rectangle, press Command Option C, select this frame, Command V, and we get basically the same styling on our frame as with the rectangle. I'm going to remove this rectangle, move that right here, this new frame, and then move that below our line, right? So we basically replaced the rectangle with this frame. So this means I am going to basically create chart lines behind, like the axis and certain levels, and I'm going to also make sure it's a little bit responsive. So let me select the pen tool, pressing P, clicking here into this frame, and then I'm going to also make sure it's actually within the frame, right? So frame 8, and it contains this line. This line is not going to be as wide. It's going to go to like 1 or 2. I think 2 works. It's not going to have round corners. It's going to have round endings. Sorry, it's going to have sharp endings, I think, for now. And now watch this. If I make sure that this line is equally distant from both sides, so let me go for 154 on the width, that means we're gonna get also a whole number on the X position, right? So we get 28 and 29 from left and right. We also reduce the size of this frame. So now we get what? We get 28 from each side. And if I resize this frame now, this happens, right? So the line stays in one place, and it's kind of difficult to adjust the size of this screen, this quote-unquote screen, right? So I'm gonna just select this line and go to constraints and set that to left and right, and now this happens, right? Can you see how the width of this line respects the width of the frame? That's awesome. And also I want to make sure that now when I actually resize this, I get basically, it's gonna stick to the bottom, right? So let me do that. Select this, left and right here and bottom here. So now we get this behavior, right? And we can easily resize this and experiment with different sizes. So that's nice. Let me select this again. Make sure it's 28 pixels from the bottom as well as the right and left. Right, so we get this, and then I am going to duplicate this and put that in the center. So Option H, Option V, and then make sure this is set to left and right, and here center, right? And then I'm going to duplicate that again and move the last one so that it's again 28 from the left, 28 from the right, and 28 from the top. also. And this is one is going to be left and right and top, right? And I'm going to also select these two and reduce the opacity to like 10%. So this is what we get. We get a chart background, one main line and two secondary lines, right? So very stylized version of a chart you might see in some kind of statistics dashboard thing, right? And I can now experiment with different sizes, as you can see, and I can basically test what I like the most. I think I'm gonna do something like this. Yep, I like that. I'm going to also move this line so that it looks like it's originating from this chart background, but then it kind of goes outside of the boundaries, right? I think this is all nicely coming together. I think I like that very much. So I'm gonna also make this background a bit darker, I think like this. Yeah, I think that works. We could also select the line again and make the shadow more prominent, right? We can do more on the shadow side because we get dark background, so it's not really that visible, the shadow, so we can kind of push this further. And yep, I like that. I think I'm gonna also do one thing, which is duplicating this, right? I'm gonna duplicate this, press enter, remove these things, and then make it like this, right? So to just get some type of repetition on the screen so that it actually looks as an interface. You could make this even darker than the background, so let me experiment with colors, and then also reduce the corners maybe to 12, maybe keep this one at 16 and this one at 12. Yeah, I think that might work. Duplicate this and move it like this, right? So it looks like there's some kind of 3D stylization of an interface, which is exactly what we are going for. It goes outside of the phone, outside of the frame. I think I enjoy this, right? And now we will somehow integrate this icon to this image. So I think we could go like move that to the bottom, maybe increase the overall size again by using the scale tool. So the key on my keyboard and then increase the size. And I think we could do this. We could actually hide the fill and create a stroke. And this stroke is going to be white, but it's going to be quite transparent, right? So we get, this is what we get essentially, right? So again, similar to what we have here, we also get the feature icon in this image. And I know it's not 100% similar, right? So we get a fill color on this icon, we don't get one here. But let me just wanted to show you a couple of techniques that you can use for these simple web illustrations. And I think I'm gonna increase the lightness of the phone background to about this color, right? Very light. I could also make the background of this image lighter like this, or not. No, let's keep it at black. Keep it at black, and we could add some text. We could add like, copy this text. So let me press Command and click on this text. Press Option, drag into this frame, and now we get this text in this frame. So let me change this color to white, and I think we could move that below the icon like this. Why don't we do that? Then I'm gonna also select all of this, move that to the left. And I think this could be something like track progress. You're gonna get some kind of progress tracking in this app that you maybe can also share with your friends, I guess, right? So again, I have no idea what these features are gonna be about. Let's just say they are going to have something to do with sharing and tracking your progress. Maybe we could make this even smaller. So let's go for like 18. Yep, that works, I think. And let me add a couple of lines in the background. I like adding lines into the background. That's gonna be white. Command Option left bracket on this line to be hidden behind everything. Reduce the opacity to around 20. And I think we could do one line right here, and one line could be here, for example. I don't know, let's try that. You could also reduce the width to 1, reduce the opacity further to like 10 on this one. One final line could be right here. Yep, I like this. I like how it's precisely meets this text. So let's make this text a bit bigger. So 18.4, you get this line going through the circle. provides balance and shows that you're tracking something. Maybe even add a gradient, so linear gradient going from fully white to transparent white, right? And maybe the transparent white is not going to be like completely 0, but just like 30. And we get this. So yeah, this is it. This is a simple illustration using just simple shapes, simple effects. And I'm gonna select this first feature visual frame, Command Shift C, and then I'm gonna select this directly, this image 8 and V. This is gonna pass our image as an image and not actual objects because we are using a component. And yep, this is the final result. Let's preview it in prototype mode. So again, this is our homepage, and then I'm gonna go over to, let me hide the interface, over to features, and we get discover our app, and we get the first feature with a nice illustration and the second feature with another illustration. We have reused the phone mockup, and I think this provides a nice 3D effect, gives us something to look at in this interface. So that's it for today. If you'd like to learn more about web design in Figma, make sure to check out the playlist in the description where all of these episodes are compiled. Thanks for watching all the way through. Leave a like if this video helped you, and I will see you in the next episode of Designing a Website in Figma.